This is going to be a short video on how to put a paracord wrap onto a stick. We'll see that paracord wraps often come on aluminium trainers. Give it a nice handle and it's quite cheap and effective. These trainers and most of the wrapping patterns rely on a hole in the handle, or many holes. So here there's a hole at the top to start, to hold the end to finish. So that's fine. And you can, there's all types of patterns you can have. Gives a really nice grip for very cheap, that'll last a long time. On a stick, which is cheaper than an aluminium trainer and often useful for other things, we don't have a hole in it. You could drill 2 holes in your stick, but then you're worrying about your stick becoming weaker. So here you can see this type of wrap didn't use any holes at all, but I was still able to wrap it with paracord to give it a nice grip for my hand. What are the advantages of this? Well, obviously it gives me some grip, so it's less likely to fall out of my hand. But you'll also notice with this pattern I've done, I have a bump all the way along there, where there's some paracord caught inside, and that bump kind of gives an edge, so I can feel there's an edge. If I was using a sword trainer, there would be that edge in it as well, because the handle of a blade generally has an edge. So on a stick, that can, if you're using your stick as a stand-in for a long knife or short sword, this handle gives you a feeling of which direction the blade is pointing. So useful when using this as a stand-in for a blade. Even if you're not using it as a stand-in for a blade, if the stick is just a stick, knowing where that edge is, and if you line it up so that it's where the edge of a blade would be, it can be useful for learning the proper biomechanics. So give you a bit of feedback. Am I hitting with the flats like that, or am I hitting this the strong way? So there's some benefits to having that edge to give you a feeling of where the edge would be. Now you can see that the type of wrapping I used, we have something which has no holes in it, and we need it to seize tight. So somewhere you can look for this is when people did it with rope. So although there are places I could go in, this is the same thing done with rope. This is called whipping, whipping. So you can look up about all different types of whipping. This one is called seizing whipping, and it's the same thing I've used here. The benefits of this pattern is it's nice and smooth everywhere except for the bump. There's other ones that will have lots of knots that maybe won't feel so good in your hand, but they're not designed for making handles. So what are we going to need for making this? Well, obviously we're going to need our stick, we're going to need some rope, we're going to need something to cut the rope, and something to just melt the ends. So we'll just do a short one. Obviously you want to measure out your rope, and this is just a bit of scrap I had, that'll be just right. So to start with, I'm just going to tie a little loop at the end, and it'll become clear later why I'm doing this. So whatever length of handle you want, put a loop like that on, and I'll just do it roughly to start, and then we'll do it properly. So I just have that rough loop, and then I'm going to wrap around and around and around, making my handle, and that loop is forming the bump. So wrapping around until I have enough of a handle. So this is quite shoddy, but it's just a rough go. Then I'm going to thread through into the handle. Actually, hang on. So thread through, and then I'm going to pull this end in underneath the groove. So you can see here it's getting pulled underneath, and I can cut off and cut off, and I have my handle. And the bit where it's being held tight is inside the wrap, so it should be protected, and we can cut off these ends. And there you have your handle. This is a very small one, it's just for the demonstration. So you should be able to figure out how much length you need at that, and you can get the right length of rope for that. So this one came off quite easily because it was very loose. So just like in any type of knot tying, or be it sewing or knitting or wrapping a handle, the important thing is to get the right tension now that you know the pattern. So lay that down. The first few loops you do, it's going to be hard to have it tight because the whole thing's going to be slipping around. But try the best you can for the first few loops to get as tight as possible. So that'll take a little bit of fidgeting, having that there, tightening it up. Once you get to the stage where it doesn't slip around the stick, so there it's still slipping, we want to have it so that it's really holding the stick as tight as you can for the first few. And really just hand tight is enough, we don't need to do anything special. So here you can see these ones at the beginning, they're fairly tight. So every time I go around, I'm trying to pull tight. Now this loop that you have through, it'll want to move a bit, so just as you're tightening, make sure that it's nice and straight. Oh, pulling through. Okay, once you're near the end, what are you going to do? We're going to try and keep it as tight as possible. Put it through the loop, or the bite, just like we did before. And I'm just going to tie it off temporarily. So just a half hitch. And that'll just hold it for the time being. Now we're going to see why we tied this loop here. To pull it through, if you've done it tightly, should be a little difficult. So having this bit at the end, it gives you something to hold. Or you won't, maybe it'll be so tight that you won't be able to pull it like that. This is the point where you have to be careful. If you have it too tight there, and the pulling it apart is too difficult, obviously you might injure yourself. So you want the wrap to be tight enough that it won't come off, but not too tight that it's impossible to finish off the knot, or you'll injure yourself. So I've a little setup where I've taken another length of rope, 2 loops in it, which I'm going to put my feet in. And here I'm going to tie in to the loop I had at the end. Now, when I'm pulling this way, It's very important that the end of the stick isn't pointing right at me, or if I slip it'll come into me, so it's off to the side a little, so that when I pull, yeah, and here you can see, oops, should be able to see that that's starting to go through. Sorry. So that's starting to go through. So we can take off the half hitch, hold that tight, and we want to get this end in underneath. So you can see that it's gone 2 turns in, so there's the bump, but it's protected by 2 turns. Want it just a little bit. Okay, 3 turns in, so that's fine. Just untie, and that's pretty much how you do it. So we now have a handle that's pretty tight. You can test it yourself. It's not going to turn in my hand, and when I cut off these ends, it's going to be no ends to fray. I can cut both of these off now. So that's it, your seizing bend handle. And here's a finished one with a little nicer rope, so it's a little lumpier. And there, you can make it longer than your hand if you want, or I usually make them, I've made them usually just the right size for my hand. This is for someone else. So yeah, the last thing to do is cut off the ends and you're there.